Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to a new video. In this video we're gonna have a look at a student's game and we will discuss several critical moments and I will give out my advice to you in different situations. So let's dive into the game and have a look how it started. e4, c5 Sicilian defense, and white plays d4, the so-called Morra Gambit. And of course, it's possible to play like my student played, to just take the pawn and then take the second pawn as well, and we reach the starting position of the Morra Gambit, and black is doing absolutely fine. However, I found for myself that the approach not to accept the gambit is way more practical because we don't need to remember as much stuff. For example, there is also this Alapin line in the Sicilian, and after this you can play knight f6, e5, knight e5, and there might come d4 when we take, and this is a very frequent and standard position. And when our opponent plays the Morra Gambit, we can actually force the same stuff, so we don't need to have two different systems against those two white systems, c3 and d4 immediately, because after c3 here we can still play knight f6, and white really has nothing better than pushing e5, after which we transpose, so we just can handle those two openings by white all the same, so we need less theory, and white can also not play his gambit style opening, which he intends to by playing d4. So from a practical point of view, I think knight f6 is way simpler. So let's get a bit deeper into the game. There happened takes, knight takes, e6, knight c3, knight c6, bishop c4, knight e7. Okay, this is maybe debatable if we should play this or not, but we won't spend more time on this. Bishop g5. And in this position, we want to stop for a moment, and if you want to challenge yourself, you can try to come up with a plan here and with a move what you would play. Actually, how I understand the position is we have some development issues. We cannot really move the knight. We have some weak square here, so that maybe knight b5 is coming, and this looks a bit dangerous to me. So the first thing I would consider is, how can I try to make this d6 weakness, which is really a weak square here because we cannot really cover it by the bishop right now. How can I strengthen this square? And for me, the first intuition would be playing a6, so there is no knight, b5, and our opponent can just not exploit this weakness yet. And maybe he can try something like e5, trying to bring the knight around, but this gives us some time, and I think we should be doing all right. Let's see how to actually counter this. Maybe we just move the queen, and once the knight jumps there, we are free to move our knight as well, and I think that's all right. Why can't we move the queen earlier? Because if queen c7 now, there is knight b5. So I think a6 is a very useful move. It's not creating further weaknesses really, because the square cannot be exploited yet. And we strengthen this d6 square by eliminating the route from the white knight to really enter there. Instead, in the game, there followed h6, which is also not bad, but I would first try to cover all my weaknesses before I create some new ones. It is all fine still, but for example, after knight b5, black needed to find an only move, d5, not to get checkmated, and the game is complicated, but black is okay. In the game, there followed bishop h4, g5, very radical, but we want to finish the development with bishop g7, castles, a6 to prevent knight b5, queen e2. And now we come at another critical point, which is should black castle here, or should black do something else first? My first intuition was, why not castle? Because we really need to finish the development. But I can also understand why it might not have been the choice in the game, because maybe h4 feels a bit dangerous. And there are some solutions like take, but after bishop d6, things may not feel that comfortable. So I can agree that you might be interested to really prevent this h4 move and delay castling a bit. Black is doing quite fine here, but you need to play some accurate moves, foreseeing that, yeah, you're not in trouble with this far advanced pawn because he cannot really take it due to knight d4. So, but this is not so easy. Let's have a look what happened in the game, which was knight g6. Knight g6, it delays castling, and if there is h4 now, we might just take it. We might also just play g4 in much better circumstances. However, there's one move which you really need to have an answer prepared to, which is bishop to d6, preventing us from castling. And the answer which followed in the game doesn't really make me happy. It feels a bit slow and also weakening our dark squares a lot. So I think if I would have gone for this line instead of castling, I really wanted to find something more convincing than bishop f8. Because bishop f8, it might be okay, but it feels a bit slow, and after this trade, also a lot of dark squares are just quite weakened, and white can try to exploit it. Also, our king is a bit in trouble. Maybe we should take with the king instead and try to go to g7. But still, I don't like this trade in these circumstances because the dark squares are a bit weak. However, there is a more dynamic solution with g4, creating counterplay immediately. And now the knight needs to go to a passive square, and then we can play b5 and bishop e5. Now we're trading in much better circumstances. First, our king is maybe able to castle later. Our knight can jump to e5. We got the f4 square for our knight and also some space for the queen. And I think black can get a kingside initiative here. And black is really active, especially with this queen g5 move. The g4 pawn is never really attacked. Or also, knight e5 might follow soon. And black is doing very, very well here. This bishop will actually just stay to cover this pawn. Black can try to launch an attack on the king side, and white can really not do a lot. For example, takes, king h1, maybe done, bishop b7 at some point, and black is doing really great. So it's much better to trade on e5 because we bring the knights into motion towards the king side. Also, this g4 push is very useful because our queen has no good square yet, and we can really try to activate the queen to the king side as well. So allowing bishop d6, even though it looks a bit scary, it's all right, but we should really try to get the counterplay on the king side then. So let's continue how the game went. There was bishop f8, rook d1, took, and now there is another critical moment, and I think this is something we should really pay a lot of attention to. So if you want to think about it on your own, try to understand what is the main problem in black's position. And we will continue. So let me explain what I think is the biggest problem in black's position. And the thing is, I think the weakened dark squares. Because there are a lot of pawns on the light squares, so the dark squares in between, they are just weak. They are not controlled by the pawns. And this bishop is very, very bad. And black should really be careful that there will be no invasion of any knights on those dark squares. For example, if white was able to push e5, play knight e4, knight f6, it's a nightmare for black. It's really going the wrong direction. The knight on f6 or d6, it will be so strong. So I think that's the key priority here, to really try to prevent that white is getting some good outposts on the dark squares. It's not that important that we really get the king out of the center, because center is still safe. We really need to watch out for the dark squares. That's the main priority. And the move in the game, I think, completely neglects this, because it's trying to hunt a light square bishop. But this light square bishop is not really doing anything. Maybe black expected the bishop to move, but white found a good response, not moving the bishop at all, playing e5. And after this e5, it's coming very fast. And maybe here black realized this trade is not that useful and tried to complicate the game. But already now there were some tactics in white's favor, like bishop e6, because after takes there is queen e4 with a fork. So this knight a5 loses a lot of time and is very unprincipled, because we have not yet finished development. We have not yet really fixed the problem with the weaknesses, and we're moving a developed piece once again, which is in general wrong. So instead, black should maybe have played either g4 and queen g5. Why is this so useful? First, because there is no e5, because it drops another pawn. And with no e5, there is also no knight e4, knight f6. And black is really keeping control now of this e5 square, which is a dark square and which secures the outpost on f6 and d6. And that's really what matters here. Another solution is also queen e7. And then play something like g4 again, so that white cannot really push here, because we can always take. Also note that after queen e7 immediately, there is no e5, because we should be able to take, because the rook is getting loose there. For example, takes, takes, and takes. And black is material up here. So that was a very critical moment, and after knight a5, white instead got some advantage, which quite quickly grew to something bigger. Okay, b5, bishop b3, not the best. We thought bishop e6 was more accurate, winning some material already. And now black castled. But probably it was safer to stay with the king in the center, especially because we really need to prevent knight e4, knight f6. And therefore it was better to play bishop b7, preventing this knight jump. And that's really the key theme here. All the dark squares are so weak, and we really need to avoid a knight coming to those excellent outposts. So we continue with the game, which was castles, knight e4, queen e7, rook d1, rook d8, and now white kind of misplayed the position. White could just have played knight f6 check and tried to open the position with h4, giving white a winning position. However, white decided to sacrifice, and black now defended well and got back into the game after king g7, knight f6, and rook g8. But things were still complicated. We will have a look how the game ended, but we will not go too deeply here. So now black played knight c6, which was not that great, f4, rook a7, g3. This is actually quite an ugly move, because first I don't really get a point. I think the point is probably that there will be h4. h5, and so white wants to protect this h4 pawn. But on the other hand, this move really weakens the white king, and there will be maybe some counterplay, and with also the long diagonal open, the king won't find such a safe spot. So instead, white could also just have played something like this, preparing also h4 without weakening the king. And it all works because after rook h4, there will be intermediate bishop g6 when the rook is loose. So g3 is not a great move, and black found a nice way finally to activate the bishop. It's not working, but it's setting a trap, and white actually fell for the trap later. So there was h4. Again, black is really counting on the fact that the king is now weak, and that after something like rook d7 immediately, the king cannot really go to this corner because, yeah, it's all weak, and there is counterplay. The king f1, h2 will drop. So this g3 move really makes white's king exposed, and that's creating problems. Let's just have a look how the game finished. After h4, there was queen d8, took queen b6. Still white would be winning now, because after king f1 there is no longer rook h2, but white blundered it away. And black really took his chance and used his one moment in the game to win. So black, after king h2, sacrificed this knight to open the bishop and to create a mating threat. And white just wanted to prevent queen to f2, but overlooked that there is a fork, and black was just winning. So finally, what can we say about this game? The main theme is, I think, black got too many dark squared holes, which was a bit caused by this bishop trade on f8. That's not a huge problem in itself, but it was really essential to control or keep the control of those dark squares afterwards as good as possible. And if we can manage to do that, then we are a pawn up, and white cannot exploit those holes. But once we really give him access to those squares, then things are going wrong. So the key moment is that we really need to keep the control over the e5 square, so that white can really not fix our dark squares and bring the knights in. So that's it for this game. I hope you found it instructive. If so, please like and subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next one. Goodbye.